I am so excited to welcome you here today to discuss all things brand development, brand identity, and how to do your best with digital media marketing. Hey everybody, it's Kristin Fuhrmann-Simmons with Kristin Simmons Digital Media, and I am so happy to have you for another episode where we talk about all the things that can help you as a business owner be your best in the world of online marketing. Today I have a very special guest with me, Maynor Larrieu. Maynor, how are you today?
Hey, good morning, Kristin. I'm pretty good, keeping busy, and I'm very excited to be on your segment today.
I am so happy to have you here. Maynor and I actually met back in 2012, which in the world of digital media feels like eons ago. He is a very special friend and a wonderful professional. He's actually working out of his home office in Belize City right now. And Maynor has a lot of wonderful experience behind you. I'm just going to brag on you for a little bit. You are currently now the assistant marketing manager for the Expedia group. You run your own company called Avant, Garde, which does all things digital media right out of Belize City. And for 8 years, you were the digital marketing manager for the BTB. You have a wealth of knowledge. And not only that, you freely give that knowledge to your friends, to your colleagues, and to members all around Belize. It's been a wonderful relationship to build with you, and I'm so happy that you're here sharing your knowledge with us today.
Thank you, Kristin, for that great introduction. And no, you're also a dear friend of mine. You spent 3 months in Belize, doing most things that some Belizeans haven't even done living here in Belize. So you're a lucky one.
I know. I feel that luck every single time I think about Belize and every time I get a chance to get back. One of the things that you really have a specialty in is talking about brand identity and brand marketing and sharing with people how your business brand should live not only in real life, but also online and as well as in print materials. And I wanted to spend some time today as we have a chance with our audience to have you share some of your expertise and tips with business owners, how your brand should be living as you're talking about yourself on social media, as you're talking about yourself in print, or I should say in maybe in digital media right now, and then also how that brand identity should live in an everyday real life fashion. So I'd love to have you dig right into that and share a little bit of your expertise.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Kristin. I think one of the personal experiences I had was actually rebranding a destination. That would be Belize. And actually, for 25 years, we had one brand, one identity, and it was time to refresh. And I could tell you, it was the most fun, challenging thing that I could have done because I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I knew about brand strategy, I knew about brand identity, I knew about brand marketing, but I didn't know that it was going to be such a long process because it's not easy. There's a difference when you're trying to rebrand your own business, because at the end of the day, you might have to consider what you want your business to portray and what your clients should see your business like. And in that process, it's a little bit simpler because you don't have external stakeholders like an entire nation saying, hey, I don't like that logo. And then you have the older folks who are more traditional, who this 25-year-old branding had already grown on them. So how do you tell them this is no longer functional, even though you're no longer standing out? And I think that's the first step, realizing whether you're creating a new brand or you're refreshing your brand. The why is very important, right? It shouldn't be a fashion statement. It should be, am I keeping up with the times? Am I trending enough? Have I evolved with my market and my audience? And I think that should be a good reason enough to refresh your brand.
You make a really good point there where brand identity can become so ingrained with the way that people think about. You're talking about an entire country, right? You're an entire industry. It can become so ingrained that it feels like that is the identity itself. So it's very difficult at that stage to say, you know what, are we keeping up with the times? Is our current brand really reflecting who we are and what we value now? Yes, there are going to be some elements to it that still reflect that. but taking the time to refresh. And it sounds like in asking those questions, you're really getting to the heart of why are we doing what we're doing now? Let me ask you a question about that brand identity. What are some of the things that came up that let you know that it was time to change?
Well, we actually did a very thorough study in terms of a market research to see what and how the brand was being looked at from a traveler's point of view. At that time, our brand hadn't evolved, and we actually put it around our competitive set. We said, how does our brand look next to an Aruba, next to a Jamaica, next to a Costa Rica? And while everybody had done several refreshes of their brand, we were still keeping, even with the old motto, which was Belize, Mother Nature's best kept secret.
Mm-hmm.
So even just changing that tagline was very, very difficult. And of course, you're going to find that there's a transitional period where even you have to grow into that new brand and ensure that it stands and it still keeps the values that you set out for. And I think one of the most important parts when building your brand is, and many might know this process, is called personification process.
Sure.
Knowing if is your brand a male or female, the age demographic, because you also have to keep in mind who your current audience and your target market is when developing your brand from scratch or refreshing your brand, right? And I think a lot of times we forget that even though it's our brand, it's not really for us to really enjoy, if you may, but
Sure.
it has to be targeted. And that, I think, is the hardest thing because it's your baby, right? And you want your baby to look the way you want him or her to look. But you also have to remember that you're not buying what you're selling. It's your customer base, it's your target audience that you want to reach. And so with that in mind, is my brand appealing to that target market? I think those are some of the things that you have to remember. And also for those that just want to change brand style or their, for lack of a better word, for a fashion statement, you also have to remember that two things. One, it is a very long, thoughtful process that can also be very expensive, right? For smaller
Sure.
businesses, you're going to have to revamp your web page. Maybe the colors of your web page, that's going to cost some money. You're going to have to redo uniforms. You're going to have to redo letterheads. I mean, all that has a cost involved in rebranding your identity.
I appreciate the scope of what you're talking about. I would love to dig back into that idea that you were mentioning about personification of your brand. A lot of business owners haven't necessarily thought about their business in terms of the way the customer sees it. They want to make it look good from their own perspective as an owner, and yet putting themselves in the position of what we commonly refer to as the avatar, right? The person that we're trying to attract. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you accomplish that and give us some ideas for ways that businesses can really step into that mindset? Because I know, just speaking personally, when you own a business, it feels like it's part of your heart and soul, and it can be difficult to relinquish that and step into the shoes of a customer. So I'd love to hear some more about your perspective on that.
No, definitely. And I'll give you the example that we did when we were refreshing the brand for Belize. One, we had to understand exactly what your core business is and what your values are and what you stand for. So for Belize, we had a team of designers, branding experts actually coming to Belize for a period of time to traverse through the country and understand what our country and its diverse culture and natural attributes were about, right? The same process you have to do, not just with your brand, but try to understand, okay, what are my fortes? What are some of my weaknesses, right? And try to portray those things with your brand, right? And so in that process comes, the natural elements of your brand. In our case, it was our cultural diversity and our natural attributes that all had to be built into one logo. And a lot of times we take a stab at it But from a designer's point of view, you gotta have that focus group meeting with them to let them know transparently what are some of the values that you want people to evoke when they see your logo, right? What do you stand for? And I think a designer would be able to help you craft a draft of your logo that will be able to represent those based on the colors that they use, the shapes that they use, the fonts that they use. And so it becomes a lot more technical, right? And all these things have a human impact and psychology to them, depending on the color and the tone of colors that you use for your logo. All that has to do with, so I would strongly recommend perhaps you can afford a team of experts, but I'm sure that you could have a meeting, and I'm not sure but I'm also a graphic designer.
Yes,
Whenever I do meet with a client and they tell me, hey, I trust you, go wild. And I'm like, that's like every designer's dream come true and nightmare. Let me tell you.
The broad stroke, right? Like, have at it. I love it. Yeah.
Because then you're not giving any direction. And unless your client says, unless you tell your client, I'm going to develop something that I feel is best fitted for you, and you will have no feedback and you will have no revisions, unless the answer is yes, then go wild, right? But that's never the case. And so it's best to have a one-on-one with, a designer who then you could talk about the history of your company, the type of customers you have, what colors are you more inclined to, and he or she would be able to give you that sense of, okay, these are the better colors suited to your target audience. These are the better font types, and just from the top of my head, you won't find a traditional small community bakeries logo being very edgy like a Red Bull logo, right?
Right, of course.
And so all those things have to be evoked in that design process so that they meet the expectations and evoke the feelings you want to evoke from your target audience. And I think that's the most important part.
I think you bring up you bring up that beautiful point. You talked about core business, your values, and what you stand for. And business owners need to get very clear on that before they begin this conversation about branding or even rebranding, right? And then they need to put themselves, exactly as you mentioned, into that mindset of, is what I'm creating or having a brand designer create, is it meeting the expectations so that the potential clients are seeing what those three things are: my core business, my values, what I stand for. So that's a delicate and yet complicated process. But you're telling me also that this takes good communication, and this is something that is very like you can accomplish this, right? You did this very well for the country of Belize, and you also do it for, I wouldn't say smaller businesses. I mean, a country is a massive business on its own, but you do this for smaller businesses as well. And it sounds like some of the same fundamental core things apply in both cases. Is that correct?
Correct. And I've been involved in rebranding very small clients brand, and I've had to go through that same sales process of, I have to have that initial meeting to understand not just where your brand is now in terms of value, your target audience, and your core values, but also to understand moving forward, how is it going to change with this logo? Because if you really think about it, rebranding or refreshing your brand, as is commonly known, it has to happen for a reason. So whoever is your designer or whoever, or ask yourself that question, why am I rebranding? I recently worked on a water company's logo here, my in-laws actually. And my wife wasn't in the country at the time, and so I had those initial meetings with mom and dad, who are the grandfathers of the company, because if I didn't get their buy-in or try to get in their heads as to why they feel they needed a new brand for their water bottles and their water department, I wouldn't have been able to deliver on point or as on point as possible. So I think that's a crucial element of rebranding, understanding that the why you need a new brand, and also where you stand at the end of the day. Like I mentioned, it's your baby and you want the best for it. It's just thinking about it from getting your baby a new outfit, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah, and both of us know that well with kids as well as business babies that we work with. But you had mentioned something really interesting to me that I think is an important concept for all business owners to consider, and that's being a brand steward, right? Is being the keeper of those ideas. And I think that that connects to what you were just talking about, is that you need to have everybody on board and you need to have one person. It's really like the captain of that ship, right? Who every idea comes back to. Once you know your mission, your values, what your core competencies are, that steward can be the person through which all of those ideas come. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what that's all about?
sure, definitely. But before I mentioned the brand store, I think, and I haven't mentioned, is actually in the development of a new brand or a new branding strategy or a brand refresh, there must be the Holy Grail, the Bible, and that's actually your brand guideline.
Yes.
I can't tell you how many times I've worked with medium and small companies, and I ask, so do you guys have a brand guideline? And they're like, no. And in my head, I'm like, okay, that explains why your branding is so not on point on social media, on your webpage, and it's varied. If you start developing a brand guideline, and I could tell you, you could sit a week developing a brand guideline, looking at the font types, looking at the colors, looking at the do's and don'ts, that's going to make the job of a brand steward a lot easier.
That's a really good point, because you and I both know that some people have that brand guideline here and other brands, and then when it's up here it changes a lot. It can change, like, based on mood. It's better to get it from here onto paper into a digital file so that it can be shared and understood by all of the stakeholders who are part of your team, right?
Exactly. And that's very important for the brand steward to abide by that brand guideline. You know, it's very important to have that 30-page document, 50-page document on the do's and don'ts. And, you know, that's what exactly I did when I was at the Belize Tourism Board. You know, I would take a pen and say, hey, if the size of a pen is less than a half-inch width and less than 2 inches wide, then the logo will use the logo without the toucan, because now you understand that the toucan won't be able to find print, and if they do, it's going to look like a smudge, and it doesn't make sense to have your brand looking that way.
Right.
So that off the bat gives you, you know, some leisure in terms of some of the things that you can and cannot do. And as you appoint a person or persons to be that brand steward, they're gonna follow that guideline, and to a certain extent and to a certain point, they will no longer need the brand guideline, because they will know exactly what's acceptable. If it's going on a t-shirt, the size of the logo, should it be only on the left hand side, should it be only on the right hand side, how your logo should go if it's going on your sleeve. And the same thing digitally, you know, on your web page, you realize that, you know, if it's going on the footer, it might be a smaller, perhaps 150 by 150 pixels, where it won't be very detailed. So you need a simpler form version, and might I say, a simpler approved version of your logo that, you know, will be standard across any digital platform, across any of your channels that you use. And I think just having that uniform brand identity also helps to have a more professional look, and it doesn't take long.
It doesn't. And I think that what you're explaining is really the language of the company that you're working with, that individuals who are part of that brand, who are going to be telling that brand story, all speak the same language, not only in how they create digital collateral, so what their social media posts will look like, and what the website updates will look like, and what the headers will look like, and those kinds of things, but also in the way that they talk about a company as well. And here's another piece of this that we haven't talked about yet, but that brand guideline also pertains to the way that the company is talked about, I should say. And I know that you work with different companies so that you can establish a brand voice. And I wondered if you could share a little bit about what that voice should be and how do you establish that?
Wow. Well, let me first start by.
I know it's a big one. That's a big one.
No, it's pretty good. I love the conversation. So actually, the brand voice is more, if again, going back to that personification of your brand, I would definitely compare the voice of a brand to the persona or the personality of someone, right? So again, the type of language that is used to describe your brand and the different voice it portrays is like I mentioned, it's like your personality. So for us in Belize, again, it was, it had at its core the target consumer. So we wanted to target the millennials. We wanted to target the outdoor traveler. We wanted to target the scuba divers. And so all of that brand voice was developed in a very spontaneous, but still very bubbly destination. And I think that within even developing, and at that time we redeveloped everything to name a few things, but we redesigned the webpage. We had to redesign the travel guide, which was 198 pages long, and I had to read that in 2 languages to ensure that it was very concise and on point. And we also had to develop the country map. And, a lot of this stuff, even in the voice, was very bubbly. As you know, here locally, we have a dialect called Creole. So the idea was to embed some of that, because when you come to the country, that's what you're going to be experiencing.
Of course.
Right? And so the same thing, it's just like if you would close your eyes and you can picture perhaps a BMW commercial, you're going to find a very, formal, elegant style. And that's their voice. Their voice is very elegant. While when you look at another brand like Disney, they're very colorful, they're very musical, they're very loving, and that's what they portray because that's what they represent. So again, your brand voice becomes an extension of your brand, not just visually, but audibly and also textually, right? So the different words that you help describe your brand have to be in line with what your core values again. So it's pretty much, I would like to say, like a 360 degrees exercise where you're looking at your brand, you're hearing your brand, you're seeing your brand, you're almost tasting your brand.
Oh, absolutely. That's a whole other conversation we could have about tasting the brand, especially of Belize too, just as a fellow food lover too. There's obviously, I think this is the tip of the iceberg in talking about brand identity and some of the important issues. And I think you've really touched on some of the key factors for most business owners, because now is the time that a lot of us are spending more time working on our digital assets. We have that opportunity to refresh our websites, to refresh the way that we're reaching out on social media, and refresh the way, frankly, that we're reaching out on professional platforms like LinkedIn. So I would happen to agree with you, Maynor. It's a perfect time to think about, is my brand reflecting the core values of my company? Have I kept myself up to date? And is it time to consider working with someone who can help me refresh that so that I'm really meeting with that target audience member and reaching out to people? Because now more than ever, we need to have a great digital presence, right? Whether that's through video, whether that's just through social media posts, but the entire way that we position ourselves online is crucial. And so it is the perfect time to really lean in and work on some of these key features. I want to ask you before we wrap up, because I could talk to you for a long time as a friend, as a colleague, because this is so interesting too, just as the way that we present ourselves. You run Avant with a wonderful team out of Belize City. Tell me something. How can people find out more information about what you do and the services that you offer?
All right, perfect. Well, let me tell you, we see ourselves as a very As a boutique digital agency located in Belize, there's actually very few agencies in Belize, but I think what drives our point is our passion. And once we become very interested in your project, I think we're a very small team. Again, we're a boutique digital agency. And those are the things that really drive us. You know, we've been in operations for over 10 years, and I think that also sets us apart. And amazingly enough, we started with clients abroad and not locally. You know, we started having clients in Miami. We actually work with a gym in Miami, Florida. We also had a couple of clients in Honduras and Guatemala, small tour companies too that we helped. And I think it evolved very quickly by the nature of me wanting to help small businesses and specifically helping them, you know, grow their business and scale. So that's one of the things that I think has set us apart. And currently we're working, like I mentioned before we started recording, with a theater company here in Belize who's looking now into live streaming and on demand their events. And that's something that we've been doing for the past 3 years. So not just web development, branding, brand identity, but also web applications and online streaming, which, as you know, has become very popular in the last 5 months.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I can speak to about you, Maynor, is your wealth of knowledge and expertise, not only in the creative artistic side and the design side, but really on the technical side as well. That was something that really impressed me when I first met you, is that you really had that comprehensive knowledge, and the fact that you were able to share that and present that in a way that made me feel smart and made me feel honored as a business person. And I really appreciate that, because we all have so much to continually learn, and it's nice to partner with somebody like you and with Avant-Garde, who really meet a person like me where you meet me where I am and make me feel good about what I'm doing. And so I really want to encourage anybody that's watching who wants to consider this kind of service, reach out to Avant-Garde. If you're here based in the US, make sure that you're comfortable with getting online, because they're comfortable with getting online with you. Having a meeting over Zoom, it's really open to you. The sky is the limit. If you want to find out more about Maynor, I am going to be posting links below that you can click through. Maynor, I want to thank you so much for making the time today to speak with me. I really appreciate your friendship immensely. I appreciate you being a colleague. I'm so happy that you're here, and I really look forward to your continued growth and success. And thank you again.
Thank you very much, Kristin, for having me and giving me a little space in your schedule also to being able to share some of this great experience that you know I love sharing.
Oh, absolutely. We'll have to have you back.
All right. Fantastic.